Life can be quite predictable for short periods of time. Every now and then something happens that you never expected or anticipated. A little over a week ago, I noticed that Brenda came home from work somewhat upset. I asked if anything was bothering her. She assured me that everything was fine. I knew it wasn't, but Brenda would eventually tell me what was wrong. When I first brought Brenda home many years ago to introduce her to my family, my parents thought I was apparently thinking with my head and not my head. She was and still is the most beautiful woman. To say she is ingenuous is still a very mild way of putting it. Her father was a mechanic, a very good one. Her mother was a cashier at a local convenience store. I was drawn to Brenda because of her beauty and figure. I was 21 years old, she was 19. It didn't take me long to determine that Brenda was completely unpretentious. She was struggling to finish high school, mostly because she had trouble reading. Her vocabulary was somewhat limited and her math ability was almost non-existent. So was it hard for a suave college student like me to get into her panties? I gave myself 3 dates to seduce Brenda. I knew she was no match for my charm, wit, and experience. A year later, I was still working toward the same goal. I don't know when I finally realized what I was up against. It just snuck up on me. I had fallen in love with Brenda. Her family was a close-knit, loving group. They weren't rocket scientists, but they all worked hard, were extremely honest and fiercely loyal to each other. Her parents had taught Brenda to avoid casual sex, and she did. For her, it was easy. She didn't waste time worrying about what others would say or think. She always did what she thought was right and what she had been taught. Gradually, I realized that Brenda's family was an exceptional group, and not at all a collection of lunatics as I had assumed at first. I fell in love with almost the whole damn family. I didn't have to bluster, brag, lie, or justify myself to them. They accepted me and seemed to genuinely love me. My parents weren't so sure that Brenda would make a good life partner for me. Somehow they envisioned me with a woman of our so-called class and upbringing. I was their blonde boy and could choose among successful women. A lawyer or a doctor with rich parents would have been the right fit for me, at least in their minds. Their thinly veiled insults never embarrassed Brenda. I wasn't sure at the time, but Brenda either missed their meaning or simply refused to swallow the bait. I argued with my parents and older sister more than once about their attitudes toward Brenda. By the time she and I were married, my family seemed to be fine with our union. By our 5th wedding anniversary, we had 2 children. My parents loved Brenda much more than they loved me. At least it seemed that way to me. I couldn't even blame them for that. When Brenda became part of my family, she embraced my in-laws with as much loyalty and honesty as she did her own. She showed all of us the true meaning of concepts. After 22 years of marriage, I still marvel at my good fortune. Brenda could not have been a better mother or wife. Her devotion to our children and me was inspiring. It made me constantly strive to be a better father and husband. Over the years, Brenda helped my mother through a couple of difficult medical issues. My father always lit up when she was around. I struck gold. Brenda never told me what bothered her that evening. I did notice that she was extremely cringing when we went to bed. She wasn't so much aggressive as she was persistent. She wanted to give me as much pleasure as possible, and this girl knew how to do that. I probably wouldn't have thought about it so much if it hadn't continued every other night. Brenda had always been passionate and loving. Now she was being carried away. After 3 nights of hardcore sex, I was beginning to worry that she was having an affair, as hard as it was to believe. Many times I have heard that a cheating wife tries to soothe her conscience by fucking her husband to death. Married men should always be wary if a wife suddenly wants a lot of sex, and especially if she wants it in a new and different way. I put a little pressure on Brenda to tell me how she felt about me. To my knowledge, she had never lied to me in our entire marriage. In fact, I had never heard her lie to anyone, not even telemarketers or salespeople. She kept telling me she was fine, and she just wanted me to know how much she loved me. "If you could do anything you wanted, what would it be, Jeff?" She asked me one night after an intense lovemaking session. "If we won the lottery or something, what would you do?" "Brenda, I won the lottery when you agreed to marry me," I laughed. "I am a very happy man. Our children are succeeding in their careers. We have each other, and now you're fucking me to death. What more could I possibly want?" "Am I too sexually demanding of you, Jeff?" Brenda suddenly became agitated. "Are you feeling weak or tired?" "Well, yes. And it's a damn good feeling, I admitted, kissing Brenda's beautiful breasts. It's a great workout, and I'm getting tougher every day, honey. Don't give up on me. I'm not crying at all. Okay, don't say I didn't let you rest, Brenda rebuked. Don't you have any secret wishes or dreams you can think of, Jeff? Don't you want to play golf in the Masters tournament or something? Brenda, I'd love to win all 4 major prizes there 5 years in a row, but I might as well wish for wings and a 30-inch penis, I grinned. You have to work for years to get good enough to just qualify there. To do that, you have to start at a very young age. And even then, it would take more talent than almost any other person on this planet. It's just not possible, but thanks for the suggestion. Would you like to go somewhere exotic, Jeff? Brenda asked. Maybe you'd like to see Europe or Australia. I could check for tickets and we could leave right away. Where did you get that from, Brenda? I asked softly. You never told me you wanted to do that. Well, what is it? You want to go somewhere, so you ask me if I want to do it? If you want to do it, we'll save up and make plans, honey. It's not something that's done on a spur-of-the-moment basis. Maybe we could plan it for our 25-year anniversary. Brenda jumped out of bed for some reason and ran to the bathroom. I could hear her sobbing. She was in there for about 10 minutes before she finally blew her nose and went back to bed. What did I say, honey? I asked Brenda quietly. If it means that much to you, we'll go right now. You've been a wonderful mother and wife, and I'd do anything for you. I don't think you've ever asked for anything for yourself before. Now, I feel like an asshole. I don't care about any trip, Jeff. I was just thinking about how hard you've worked to take care of our family all these years and how nice it would be to reward you for everything, Brenda admitted. You've rewarded me every day of our marriage, I whispered, pulling her against my chest. You were such a good wife and mom that I always wanted the best for you and the kids. I was happy that I could provide for you. It was my duty as your husband and father of your children. So you're happy, Jeff? Have I been a good lover to you? Are you happy with our sex life? She asked. Oh my God, I moaned. I don't think I could stand it if you were even more loving. You're incredible, darling. The next evening, Brenda's younger sister, Annie, dropped in for a visit. She had married a man 12 years older than her, and he had died of a massive heart attack a couple years earlier. She was a younger version of Brenda. She had a great figure and total devotion to her family. As usual, I flirted shamelessly with her. We had been doing it since Brenda had first brought me to her house to introduce me to her family. Nothing ever came of it, and I never tried to go any further. Brenda and Annie were very close, and they would rather walk over red-hot coals than betray each other. That was one of the reasons why I felt so comfortable flirting with Annie. I knew she wouldn't show up on my doorstep one day insisting I run away with her. You want to have sex with Annie, don't you, Jeff? Brenda suddenly blurted out when Annie and I were having a little joke after a few drinks. You act like you're just joking, but she really turns you on, doesn't she? How should a man answer that question? I didn't want to lie or hurt Annie's feelings. I certainly didn't want to tell my wife that her sister really turns me on. I decided it would be best to change the subject. If it doesn't rain soon, I'm going to have to start watering the lawn, I announced. I'd better go see if there was enough hose in the garage to cover the whole yard. I was halfway to the garage door when Brenda stopped me. Jeff, come back here, she insisted. I asked you a question. I'm not upset, honey. It just finally occurred to me how much you long for Annie. I don't blame you. What man wouldn't want a woman as sexy as her? Brenda, I never came close to cheating on you with Annie or anyone else. Ask her. Sure, I think she's beautiful, but you're my girlfriend and that's all I need, I replied affectionately. Or at least I thought so. Don't make a little flirting out to be more than it is. If it makes you feel better, I won't do it again. My stomach rumbled. I rarely had stomach problems, but the booze and Brenda's accusations made me queasy. That's when I thought of Dramamine. I started taking it to calm my stomach when I went deep-sea fishing with my buddies a few years ago. It worked great, so I kept it by my side in case my stomach tried to rebel. The only side effect was that I couldn't drive after taking it because it always made me drowsy. Brenda also seemed agitated and excited. Her behavior had been odd for several days, but the last run was the strangest I've ever seen. Annie, would you come into the kitchen with me? Brenda asked her sister. Jeff, we'll be back in a few minutes. The two of them left the room. My stomach was still reacting to the nervous environment, so I hurried to the bathroom and swallowed a couple Dramamine pills. I was sitting on the couch when Brenda and Annie came back into the living room. Jeff, Annie was telling me the other day how lonely she felt after Steve died. I think it would be really nice of you to get her into bed and make love to her, Brenda concluded. I almost soiled my pants right there on the couch. Annie blushed and shifted nervously from foot to foot, looking down at the floor. The whole thing was surreal. Brenda, what's wrong? I demanded an answer. Are you okay? You've been acting strange for days, and now it's getting completely wild. Annie is an extremely attractive woman and quite capable of finding male company. You don't need to force her and push her into my arms. Force her? Brenda asked. She's been crazy about you for years. I'd rather have her problem solved by a man who respects and loves her than by some stranger. I know you love her, at least as a sister. I don't think I'm asking too much of you. Tell him what you told me, Annie. Well, I've been alone for a couple years, Jeff, and if Brenda doesn't mind, I'd appreciate it if you'd take me to bed, Annie replied, not taking her eyes off the floor. It would only be for once. Could you do that for me tonight, please? It was obvious to me that something was going on. It was so out of character for Brenda and Annie that for a moment I thought they were doing cocaine or smoking crack. It was already noisy enough in my head that I had a hard time finding a logical reason for their actions. Annie was a very desirable woman, but I had never cheated on Brenda, and I didn't think now was the right time to start that. Annie, if I was going to sleep with another woman instead of Brenda, you would be my first choice, I admitted. However, I don't believe that you both really want this. Something else is going on. What? Damn it, Jeff! Don't make my poor sister beg for it, Brenda exclaimed. You know you'd like to get her into bed, and Annie really needs it. Just make love to her and make me proud of you. If you don't, you'll be sleeping alone for a very long time. Annie and I were surprised by Brenda's passionate speech. I had never seen Brenda lie, and she seemed as serious as a heart attack. Annie took my hand and jerked me to my feet. Brenda even smiled at us as we headed for the bedroom. My head began to slowly spin as I followed Annie. It was like a strange dream, or more accurately, like the time I was getting what was called local anesthesia for a minor surgery. I was awake, but I couldn't think. That's how I ended up naked on the bed with my wife's sister riding my face. I insisted that we start this way so that Annie would get as much pleasure as possible. I had a very real fear that I would get so excited that I would shoot my load before I finished the job. It was my way of holding out for at least a few minutes. Annie was on her way up too. My tongue drove her to it. Maybe I didn't have enough air. Maybe it was all the booze and Dramamine. I don't know. Maybe it was a combination of the three. Annie tensed up, moaned loudly, collapsed on my face and sat on top of me, coming off her sexual peak. As she settled her wet pussy on my face, I just fell asleep. It wasn't one of those fleeting moments you have when you're driving, fall asleep for a second and wake up in fear. I was just dead to the world. I must have been because Annie's scream didn't wake me up. It was like a train in the distance. I heard it, but it meant nothing to me. I felt hands on my face and started to regain consciousness. And that's when I finally woke up, but I was listening to my wife and her sister with my eyes closed. You said he wouldn't die for months, Annie screamed. Look what I did to Jeff. I thought so too, Brenda sobbed. Help me give him CPR. I pondered this interesting information. These women were expecting me to die. Then I felt someone's lips on mine and felt someone exhale into my lungs. I opened my eyes slightly and saw Brenda take another deep breath to pass it to me. I felt her tears drip down my face. If she was trying to kill me, why is she trying to save me? Had she changed her mind? Had I been poisoned? Why do Brenda and Annie want me dead? And why did they have to fuck me first? Brenda breathed out into my mouth again. Then Annie started pressing on my chest, and hard. I soon realized that I couldn't just play dead if I had to endure that kind of pressure. My ribs wouldn't be able to take it. I reached out and grabbed Annie's breasts and pushed her away from me. She struggled to push on my chest again for a second or two before realizing that I had to be alive to squeeze her breasts like that. Jeff! Brenda exclaimed. You're alive! I was so afraid you were dead. I know you're really sick, and I thought Annie had been too rough on you. Brenda started kissing my face and lips, which were covered in Annie's juices. I decided that if she didn't mind, neither did I. I slid my tongue into her mouth and there was a brief duel between us. Then Brenda pulled away. "The cat's out of the bag, Jeff. We know you have pancreatic cancer and only have a few months to live. I don't know why you thought you couldn't tell me that. I was worried sick. I was hoping you'd tell me so I wouldn't betray Stella's trust." "Why didn't you tell me anything, Jeff?" Brenda sobbed. "Wow, I have pancreatic cancer, and I have a couple months to live. Wouldn't I have to see a doctor to find out, to get that diagnosis? I need more tests and a second independent opinion. Where did this come from?" I began to suspect that there had been some kind of misunderstanding about my health, and I thought it meant that my desire to please Annie would be denied. "Does that mean you are rescinding your demand that I take Annie to previously unattainable heights, Brenda?" I asked, holding her sister to my bosom. "Make up your mind, and soon." "Well, I want you to die happy, Jeff, but not today," Brenda fretted. "What just happened to you?" "It was a combination of drinks, a couple of Dramamine pills, and Annie's hip severely restricting my air supply," I replied, as Annie started making strange noises. "Do you want me to keep pleasuring this woman or not, Brenda?" At that moment, the phone rang in the living room. I never allowed having a phone in the bedroom so I wouldn't be awakened by the ringing in the mornings when I was asleep. "Well, as long as you're okay, go ahead, Jeff," Brenda replied as she left the room to answer the phone. I smiled and put Annie back down. Then Brenda came back into the room. "It was an interesting call, Jeff and Annie," she began. "Jeff's mother just told me that his Uncle Buck has pancreatic cancer. I didn't know it, but Buck's real name is also Jeffrey. This must be the same Jeffrey Wright that my cousin Stella read the medical report about and thought he was our Jeff. Annie, can you hear me? Jeff's not dying of cancer. It's his uncle," Brenda explained. "That means you don't have to do it. Jeff didn't have to faint by eating you either. The whole thing was a misunderstanding. I never realized it would be so hard to please Annie. I was really trying. The problem was that my wife was standing next to me trying to explain why she thought I was dying. It ruined my concentration. I realized I had crossed the line from having mercy sex to making a big fucking mistake. I let go of Annie's head and rested my arms at my sides. I was like a kid showing my mom that it wasn't my fault. Brenda leaned over, wrapped a fistful of Annie's hair around her hand, and pulled it off my penis. Annie reluctantly let go of me. "Thank you, Annie," Brenda smiled. "That won't be necessary anymore. Jeff isn't going to die anytime soon, even if he thinks he's in heaven right now. Your work here is done. Thanks for your help, and I appreciate your willingness to help your sister, but it's over, okay?" Annie's head was thrown back at a sharp angle, which looked damn uncomfortable. All she had to do was lift herself up, and the pressure on her head would stop. "Sis, Jeff's getting close," Annie gasped. "It would be cruel to leave him like this, especially after what he's done for me just recently. He needs to relax." "You may be right, Annie, but Jeff doesn't have cancer. He's not going to die anytime soon, and he's my husband," Brenda pointed out somewhat emphatically. "I really want to thank you for helping me with my half-baked plan, but your work here is done." "Good for you, sis," Annie glowed. "That's the way to take care of your man. I think it's time for me to start dating again." Now I remembered what I'd been missing for the past couple years. "Be sure to let me know if Jeff ever has any health issues, Brenda. I'll always be happy to help." Brenda slowly lifted her head and smiled at my sister and me. She literally looked like the cat that ate the cream. "Annie, I'll introduce you to a few single guys, but it won't happen again," Brenda promised. I had come to a stupid conclusion. I was lucky that Jeff's mother had called now. I would have been very upset if I had found out that Uncle Buck was dying and not Jeff, especially if it was after poor Jeff had been raped by my own sister, whom I had invited into our bed. "That was a good lesson for me," Brenda admitted. "I tried to find a way to make Jeff's life happier and his death less devastating. I just didn't realize that I could do it on my own, and I could work on it every day. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of you on my own, aren't you, Jeff?" That was the last thing I heard as I fell back into sleep.
Thanks for hanging out and listening. If you liked the story, hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Make sure to check out our other wild tales right here on the end screen. Catch you in the next story.